Hi, this is Spencer Mitchell with the FreightTech Fanatic podcast. Today, our guest is Lucas Schorer. Lucas is the co-founder of Kestrel Insights. Lucas, how you doing today?
Good. I'm doing well. I guess we're recording this on February 22nd. We're in the middle of that winter storm moving across Montana. So it's 3 degrees and about 20-mile-an-hour winds outside. So I'm not doing much else today. So this is perfect.
It's a good day to record a podcast. What part of
Absolutely.
Montana are you in?
So we are in
What?
Whitefish, Montana. So far
Nice.
northwest corner. And yeah, a couple of our teammates are in Kansas City, Sacramento. We got a guy down in Salt Lake. We're kind of spread out a little bit, as a data company, which I'm sure we'll get into. We've kind of got that luxury. But yeah, it's a good spot up here. Love it. Lots of great stuff. Winters can get a little long, but the summers make it all worth it.
Hmm.
So that's good.
Yeah, yeah. The springs and summers, you get into fishing time, and I don't know what you like to do out there, but outdoor activities around that time, I'm sure, are beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were talking to
Cool,
Cutser the other
man.
day, and I swear the only reason he signed up was I said, "Hey, you sign up with us, I'll get you out here, we'll go fishing." And he, all of a sudden, legal started signing off on things started moving quick. So yeah, Montana's a good spot.
That's great. That's great. It's a good lure.
Yeah.
Fishing joke there. So, so Lucas, tell us a little bit about Kestrel Insights.
Yeah. So Kestrel Insights, we are a data company and we have automated geofencing. Our goal is to really deliver trust and deliver confidence in the analytics around location information that teams are using all over the space. So what a bunch of buzzwords there, probably people are going to sign off, but let's talk it a little simpler. Basically, a geofence is a virtual boundary anywhere on Earth. You can draw them around anything you want. And obviously, in our industry, they're very, very commonly used around shipper facilities, distribution centers, railroad terminals, ports, things like that. And they're used to automate
Mm-hmm.
tracking. So we kind of live in that space and are moving to automate that process.
Mm-hmm. I thought this was really interesting the first time we spoke. The sort of how you structure geofences. We'll get into that in a little bit. I think it's really unique in the way that you structure them and sort of draw polygons and vertices around locations, but we'll certainly get into that. What I want to hear first is what's your background? I mean, how did you stumble upon the need for better geofencing within supply chain technology?
Yeah. So I've never claimed to be, never will claim to be freight background that goes back years and years and years, working on the ground, broker and freight, anything like that. I come from a data background, and so does our kind of our founding team. And what we saw was, and you kind of already touched on it there, was that idea of drawing polygons, drawing geofences. Is we ran into a group who that's literally what they were doing. They had a team of, I think he said 7 interns, and they needed to polygon geofence 150,000 locations, large trucking company, and they were 4 months into it, and they were about 3/4 of the way through or something like that. And so just looking at that seemed absurd. And he kind of explained the story and he was like, this is absurd. So we just saw a lot of manual processes around the creation of geofences. So we didn't invent geofencing. That's been around for a long time. We're bringing a better tool to the market on how you actually access the geofences themselves. So precision in terms of these polygons, where they're exact to the boundaries of a facility, and just getting people away from circular geofences, which are also really common, where it's basically we've all typed an address into a map, it drops that red dot, you can automate just drawing a circle around that. But the reports that kicks out, the timestamps around arrival time, departure time, detention, or time spent on site are just very inaccurate. And one of the first things I said was, we want to bring confidence and trust to your analytics, to your reports. And if you're using inaccurate geofences, you're starting from the beginning with just low quality data.
Mm-hmm. So, is it fair to say that there are a lot of trucking companies, warehousing companies, companies that are tracking freight that are drawing their own Like, what are they doing? They're going to Google
Oh
Maps.
yeah.
They're like looking at
No.
Google Maps, and then they're pinpointing around a facility, and then they're like drawing out the driveway, and they're like, okay, this is the geofence, and then getting like some lat long points around that, and just kind of they're literally drawing these off of Google Maps.
You're spot on. Yeah. And whether it's Google Maps or any kind of map overlay, it's exactly that process. Typing in an address, it zooms to it on the map, and then now you're looking at like, okay, what is the boundary? What is the parking lot? What is the geofence need to cover? What does it need to encompass? And so yeah, literally people clicking on maps, drawing polygons. And the intern situation, probably has the lowest financial impact, at least. They're probably pretty cheap, or maybe some class credits. But we had one of our earliest customers, because what happens is teams don't really necessarily consider that option or that step of, okay, how do we get the geofences? So we had a team come to us, small team, and they were like, we don't have any other people. And so it fell on the laps of the software engineers, because they were the ones integrating the geofences into the tools. So they were the ones who just kind of had the highest need for them, and they were just kind of de facto took it over. And I was talking to this guy, I'm like, what are you paying a software engineer to draw shapes on a map? And he was like, Lucas, I don't even want to talk about it. Yeah, I can't even believe this. So it typically falls to someone who shouldn't be doing it, doesn't want to be doing it, because there's not typically a job description in someone at these freight companies that's like, draw the geofences. And not only that, there's a maintenance process that goes with it as well. So everyone's using different GPS trackers, all different kind of ELDs. They tend to have varying levels of kind of accuracy or tolerance in that blue dot. Literally that blue dot you see on the map, kind of the accuracy of that tends to vary from company to company. So teams are always having to tweak their geofences. What they think is going to work off the bat isn't necessarily always going to stay. So it's an ongoing process, and teams just are starting to see, hey, just because we drew the geofence once, we're not out of the woods. And so we can be that service, be that database to totally take that over for teams is kind of our goal.
Is this a new thing in FreightTech? I mean, nobody else is automating geofences.
It's not very common. And some of the teams we have run into that are doing great things around automation of geofences, the problem is they're siloed within different platforms. So for example, you have to be on telematics platform X or mapping software Y to use this data. So the second you put any kind of gate up like that, you can't be the standard that the industry really needs. And so because someone's like, okay, I'm not on that platform, now I'm forced to go draw my geofences, where we're just a data company. You're not coming to Kestrel Insights to track a vehicle or to get detention reports or things like that. We're just a data company that has a centralized database of geofences all over the country, all over the world, actually, focused on the supply chain. And so one of our goals with being that standard is, for example, someone comes to us for a Walmart in Kansas City. We likely already have it because another customer has used it or requested it. And also we've got people out in the field providing feedback on it. So they're like, hey, this geofence needs to get tweaked a little bit, or they're expanding in this corner. So everyone benefits from that network effect of using the same geofence. And now when you go to these shippers and you say, hey, there's hundreds of different carriers going to this Walmart, when they start trying to converse on detention reports or timestamps and things like that, Walmart knows, okay, you guys are all using the same geofence. This is great. Everyone's on the standard, because right now, a lot of these people are fighting with all these different carriers using a different geofence. Some are wrong, some are circles, some are polygons, to really try to bring a standard where it's needed.
That's awesome. I love the way that companies find their first customers.
Yeah.
How did you run into this trucking company, by the way? What got you in front of this company to discover this
Yeah.
problem? What were you looking for?
Truthfully, just in the early stage of our company, we were just trying to have any and every conversation we could. And we didn't come out of the gate with like, hey, all right, geofences, this is the problem. We're starting the company tomorrow, funding in the bank, let's go. It was one of our co-founders had success in kind of a parallel industry, agriculture, with how they, as an industry, really went through their digital transformation. And these good old boy farmers were bringing on automated tractors and things, no problem. And so once they kind of went through their digital transformation, they, as an industry, were very comfortable with data and bringing on these automated processes. And so we looked at similar industry here, and a lot of parallels and just a lot of manual processes in data processing and data access. And we just started honing in on geospatial data, facility data, and things like that. We just started asking questions and having as many conversations as we could. And this conversation just came up, and it just kind of set us on a track to continue to look into it more and more, see if we could find a solution. And that's kind of what it is. So yeah, it's kind of funky. People ask, like, how did you get into geofences for shippers and things like that? Because that's all we do, just geofences. And it's an interesting concept. So that's what kind of spurred us on this path.
Yeah. You know what I find super interesting about Kestrel, and really we're the same way in this, is that I envision the Kestrel has people that have problems, and Kestrel is a piece of a solution. So you're an infrastructure. You're building an infrastructure. You're building a standard around geofences, around facilities. And I would imagine that people would come to you with all sorts of ideas of the problems that they want to solve. So you don't really have the customer facing application. You don't have the TMS. You don't have the carrier facing application. It's embedded into something. So what's been your experience as one of those infrastructure companies, because to me, with TruckerCloud, what I found is like people come with ideas around commercial advertising and how
Mhm.
PLDs and telematics play into commercial advertising, which I never would have thought. You have your sort of traditional use cases, load tracking, but hey, I actually want to understand impressions on ads or something of that sort. So being an infrastructure company, I think you get to see some of the really innovative ideas out there, right? So what's been your experience as an infrastructure company? And what do you see are like the pros and cons of that? And is it harder because you don't have like a direct go to market? You sort of have to uncover these use cases. You can answer that question in 5 different ways.
Yeah, it's just a good question. And I think you guys have an interesting and very, very similar touch point on this that maybe not everyone sees or everyone gets a chance to experience. I think the first part is you have to just be so comfortable with and not necessarily, I guess, good at, but just believe in the value of partnerships because our data is useless without our partners, without the software tools that actually leverage the data, integrate the data, and get it out into the world to use it in meaningful ways. And I think that's not necessarily tough for a lot of people, but some people may come from a sales background of, hey, our company and our product is just go, 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 and we can push this and sell this by ourselves because it's a standalone item. Or someone like ourselves, a data company, infrastructure company, you can't have that mindset. It takes time to build relationships and work with teams to support their ideas and their missions and how our data can go that direction for them. Because we've had teams come from use cases around labor trafficking and human trafficking to detention reports to border crossings in South Africa, like all these crazy things that all focus around a geofence, but are all very, very different use cases and often are supported in different ways. And I think one of the biggest things too is you can't chase, especially an early company, you go squirrel and chase all these different ideas. Someone comes to you with like, hey, you want this customization and something like that. And it can be tough to say no to a whale off the bat when you're like, God, that would just be amazing. And just get your guys' logo on our website would change the game. But it can be dangerous to go and chase these one-offs. So really just staying true, taking your time, building those relationships we found is very effective and very helpful in kind of just keeping the company growing. That's kind of the way
Yeah.
I would look at it. Yeah.
One of the coolest things I think about the infrastructure company is I'd be curious to see if you have this experience as well. What I've seen is actually hesitated to hire a salesperson for a long time because I wanted to have the conversation with the CTO or the CEO at each one of the technology companies because they all presented a different problem and a different use case. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, as an infrastructure company, you can then go, oh, that's a really interesting use case. Let me assess this and see how it might fit into a broader strategy or see if it could be something that can sort of become a vertical for us, right? And not
Mm-hmm.
just a one off customized solution. So I hesitated for a long time because I wanted to have those conversations, sort of learn from customers. I think that's one of, in my experience, one of the coolest things about being an infrastructure company is that you learn from customers constantly, but customers aren't just like, they're not providing feedback on something they want in the product. They're providing like an entirely new vertical that you
Mm-hmm.
could chase and
Mm-hmm.
find other companies that fit into that as well. What's been your experience around that? Is it similar, or what's been your experience around the discovery process on individually?
I think you're spot on. And I was slash am the same way where I don't want to let go of that sales process because you do learn so much. And I've been able to, I think, hold on to that by, bringing some help on in the pre-sales, post-sales side of things, like for example, some of the prospecting or initial outreach. And then when things really start getting into demos and specifics and things like that, I'm able to be a part of that and still continue to learn, see these different use cases. I think in terms of what we've seen or a lot of the teams who come to us, they understand. I mean, we're a pretty straightforward concept. So they usually the general outreach, they get what we're doing and they see value in what we deliver. But then they start wanting to do all these great things like, oh gosh, like what if we could add nested geofences inside for different things and gate? And what if we could do like dynamic geofences and put these weather inputs and all this crazy stuff? And I'm like, hey, I love it all. I think it all sounds great. And our foundation as a geofence company can support that. But let's step through this in the right fashion. So get our geofences in and let's test just that polygon infrastructure first off for you guys, because that will influence all these different decisions down the road. And we can grow with you guys and we're set up to do that. But just making sure, I feel like I always try and bring it back to, okay, just our initial value prop of an automated polygon geofence. Do you need that? And does that bring you value? And if so, let's start there and then kind of grow. So I love the use cases. So I was a mechanical engineer in school, and I always remember this. We had this design class, and we literally had a lesson on brainstorming. And one of the biggest things the professor said was, you throw out any idea that ever comes to it. Like even if you're brainstorming, designing an engine for a car and someone wants to throw out something about UFOs and aliens, don't shoot down ideas, because you never know if the concept of a UFO is going to spur an image in some other teammate's mind of this saucer, which then they connect to a circular gear. You just never know how teams are going to connect
Hmm.
these wild thoughts, and you just got to let them go. And so I think the same thing with use cases. Let all these ideas flow, and you never know how they could influence something more realistic in the day to day, but still give you that vision of what you want to grow to with your customer. So I always think that's an interesting concept.
That is an interesting concept. Do you apply it to yourself when you're thinking about sort of brainstorming concepts or decisions as well? Because I actually just found myself doing this today. I was trying to assess a situation, and I was like I just got to write down anything that comes to my mind
Yeah.
associated with how we could handle it. Write down the craziest ideas, and then try to come up with something. Do you apply that to
Oh,
yourself as well when you start to think about problems?
100%, 100%. And then the budget kicks you in the teeth real quick. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, well, yeah, let's bring this back to earth. Yeah, it's a great concept. You got to be timely with it. You can't spend 2 weeks throwing out ideas about aliens and UFOs, but in that initial stage of getting the ball rolling, if you hit like a writer's block or something of that sort where you're just struggling to get ideas flowing, I think it's a great kind of jump start to just see where things go. And it's so helpful in especially group settings where you have other people on the team or you're trying to converse with multiple team members. When you're by yourself, I feel like you can crank through thought processes in your man. You're leading it and you're the only one with input. But I think in a team setting, so helpful.
Yeah. One more question on the product and future vision, and then I want to hear more about the team itself and your journey. From a product perspective, I know I have in my mind some ideas of the thing I want people to build on top of us. I'm like, man, I really
Mm.
wish someone would build a detention product with ELDs and geofence data, right? Nobody's built the
Yeah.
greatest detention app yet. What's the, and maybe you don't want to say because maybe it's something you guys spin into someday, but is there something that a use case you really like or something you really want somebody to build on top of you?
Gosh, that's interesting. I think we're still at the point where so many teams don't have just either they're not, some teams just aren't even using polygon geofences. And like and so even just getting those people to a polygon system, and then from there an automated system where anytime an address gets typed in, they're just pinging our database, and it's just that it's such a good flow. And we have customers who are doing that where every day, every hour, they're sending us addresses because someone's creating a load on their platform. When they type in address A to address B, it bounces off KI's database. Those polygons are right there, and they can do auto arrival and auto departure and all these great tools. I think that we're still pretty early, just been a couple of years as a company, 3 years, 2, 3 years, where I still think getting more people to that initial idea, initial concept is still so exciting and still a lot of interest around that, where I think we're still focused on that. I think the coolest thing would be if we to a drone application. So the long-term vision of someone
Hmm.
potentially building something really cool on top of our geofences. Right now, our geofences are all X and Y. If we can add a Z component and do a vertical and do cubes and these 3D images and start to be involved in like kind of the drone delivery, drone market, that would be super cool. That is so far beyond me. And when you start getting all kinds of crazy aviation standards, which I don't even know if I want to think about, but if I were just thinking cool stuff, that'd be sweet for someone to build that on top of our database.
I didn't predict that at all. I had no idea you were going to go there. That really is going to be applicable in the future when we have drones that are doing deliveries, which is today, but also when we have Jetsons flying cars and these sorts of things as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You could geofence like a vertical gate on a facility, right? The truck
Yeah,
is flying in, and then
exactly. Like, where is that entry point? And things are going that direction with autonomous trucking, and it'll get to drones. And so there's a lot of cool ways. And I think for us, which we really like is because we had this conversation early on with investors and stuff, was as things go to autonomous trucking, are you guys just going to get pushed out of the market? And we said, absolutely not, because I don't think the autonomous trucking transition is going to happen as overnight as some people think and like to talk about. It's going that direction for sure. But
Mhm.
even when they get to that direction, we will have spent years and years building such a solid geofencing database and foundation that same data will be so applicable for autonomous trucking, where those geofences, those gates, those access points are going to be so needed in automation. So it's exciting to see kind of how it can grow, how we're set up to grow and evolve with the way technology in the industry is probably going to go, which is cool.
Yeah, I could see a world where it makes sense for there's a world where OEMs are sort of built to access something like Kestrel in order to open gates or in order to do certain things, and that's already embedded within a vehicle.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your team,
Yeah.
co-founders, founders, team now. Like, what's been that process of starting that team, building the team, who's involved?
Yeah. So starting the team was, yeah, it's so funny to think back on what we were doing, some of the things, but starting the team was three of us as co-founders, and we were poking around in just a few different things on data products and things like that. And then one of our co-founders who was in the agriculture space and saw a lot of parallels there, he really helped open our eyes to the kind of the way data companies get built, how they, again, that partnership mentality of partnering with the technology platforms to be successful and kind of playing in that space, but not having to build the software tools to have that level of impact, because that's a whole nother beast, obviously, going the software route versus the data route and infrastructure route.
Mm,
And they both have their caveats, they both have their challenges. And because of our team, we had the experience and the knowledge to go the data and the infrastructure route. So that's kind of where we started. And then we'll have expanded. We brought on a handful of people last year that have really helped us out with, I'm not a marketing guy, so we brought on some help on the marketing side. I don't know if you know Adam Robinson, his agency, the Robinson Agency, is phenomenal. They've been a huge help, and we brought someone in-house to kind of help work with them and just ideate with them, and all that stuff around SEO and website traffic and who's there. And I'm like, dude, this is so far
yeah,
above me. So
yeah,
it's helpful
yeah,
acknowledging your pitfalls and where someone else can just in an hour can do what it would take me a day, and absolutely pulling my hair out and putting my fist through the drywall. So it just that's been so helpful. And then on the development side, we've got a gentleman named Niels Bauer. He's been helping us out a ton, and just again, totally outside of my realm of that language of API development and database development and cloud infrastructure. It's just, I could get by on the marketing, but then that is just a foreign language to me. So he's great to work with because he's got the technical background and can support that, where I, being here from the start, I feel like I have just such a good grasp on the vision and what I know we need to accomplish for our customers, and how we do that technically is a great way to go. So yeah, we're a pretty small team, but we've staying focused on our core concept of automating geofencing for the supply chain, and just staying focused on that, I think allows us to deliver a lot of value and heavy punch from a small team. So I always want to hire more people, could always use more help. That's a good problem to have as you're growing, and you kind of go from there. So it's been fun building that
yeah,
team, acknowledging your weaknesses and knowing who to bring in.
yeah. And tell me about the experience as a founder, as a co-founder in the FreightTech space. What's been surprising to you in both the great and the challenging areas of being a founder?
Yeah. I think what's been surprising is I've always run into the most helpful, willing to give their time of day people. I think if you're just honest with people, like when we were early on, just saying, hey, I got nothing to offer you. This is what my idea is. What do you think about this? And I couldn't believe the amount of people who were like, yeah, I don't mind. Here's 15 minutes on my calendar. Let's chat. And just people who like are those career freight individuals who have spent so much time and have knowledge beyond anything I could ever have the chance to gain myself from my own experiences, and just helping just ideate and give good feedback and stuff like that, I think has always been incredible. And then it's always funny when you're in an early company, you're like, man, am I getting people to have actually put pen to check and write me and send me cash for something like this? And seeing people who acknowledge when you're early on and they're like, hey, I get it, but I believe in this. I think this is great, and putting that trust in you. And then when you actually deliver, and seeing that support early on from some of the freight tech partners of ours was incredible. Obviously, we delivered and made sure to come through, which is obviously helpful looking back. But I think just the willingness to support growth and new players was great. I didn't feel like it was this cold shoulder ever where people were like, no, like we're keeping tight to our own little niche and not interested in sharing ideas and things like that. People have always been willing to support us and answer questions and things like that as we were growing. So I think that's always been great about the industry.
Yeah, I found the same thing. It's fun to go to conferences and see the same people again and
Yeah.
again,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a small industry.
or maybe meet new people that. Yeah, it really is. And so it's great to have those connections. And sort of just every time you go, you get an introduction from one person you know to somebody else. It's sort of like you're doubling your network every time you go to
Yeah.
one of these
Yeah.
events. And it's fun as a co-founder. It's fun as
And
a
they're not,
technical co-founder to sort of have access in certain ways.
yeah, I was just say too, everyone's been great and always been open to conversation stuff, but also it's a no bullshit industry. If you're doing something stupid, doing something wrong, they'll tell you. So you're not wasting time, which is good. Feedback loops are quick, feedback loops are tight, and that's valuable. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, speaking of people and helpful people, I did give you a warning that I was going to ask this question. If there's one person in the freight space or in the supply chain space anybody you could meet that might be out there listening to this podcast someday, whenever it releases, who would that be and why?
Yeah, you gave me a heads up, so I appreciate that. And I was like, okay, how can I catch him off guard? Like the drone thing. So I was thinking back to, I got this article from, I can't remember where it was, but it was a Schneider driver. His name was Bob Wyatt, drove for 51 years, logged like 8 million miles. And I would love to talk to him. So Bob
Mm,
Wyatt, if you're out there, I just think like that, that coverage of an industry over that level of time and going through so many different technology changes from just the earliest of paper logs and pencils to now all these ELDs and automated tracking, and where we're trying to push things with automation and tracking, where you've seen successes in all these different phases of technology development from a driver's perspective, because I don't get the benefit of engaging with drivers so much on a daily basis. You know, our partners are FreightTech
mhm.
platforms, software platforms, things like that. So rarely do I get the perspective of the dude on the ground driving into this facility, going through my geofence, my gate, or at least from the mapping point of view, what actually that looks like, what's helpful for them. So yeah, I think that will always be an interesting person to chat with. Like you said, you get a chance at a lot of these conferences to talk to a lot of the FreightTech executives and things like that. So I'm trying to think if I could, what would be a good way to kind of pull myself out of that everyday life and get a little grease in my hands. You know, so Bob White, if you're out there, let me know.
That is an amazing answer. Absolutely love that. You might be the only person that ever says Bob White, but I love you for that. That's amazing. One more question for you. My team would kill me if I didn't ask this. The interface to me of geofences and telematics makes a lot of sense, right? There's
Mhm.
application in a number of different areas, but how do you view your interface with telematics? I know you have some relationships in telematics space now, so I think that that's interesting as a
Mhm.
partner, but then also the use of telematics sort of to customer facing applications. How do you guys view the interface there? Because you almost potentially sit in the middle of the application of telematics into the real world. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question because some of the questions we get asked a lot are like, what are your use cases for your customers, or what are you hoping your customers solve with your data? And it's such a broad question for us because we come so early in the process. It's like putting gas in a car. If you're putting gas in a car, what are you hoping your drivers solve with now being able to run their car? It's like, I don't care. It can be just driving a kid to school. It can be picking up groceries. It can go cross country ski or driving trip. It could be an ambulance. It could be a fire truck. It could be so many wild things. But the intent is just from the very start, allow the tool or the vehicle in this case to run and do what it's intended to do. And so us with our relationship with telematics providers, we're like, hey, you guys have built all these incredible tools. You can track, you can automate arrival times for your customers. Your customers can do all these cool things, send notifications. You've built all these incredible things. Use the best geofence to support those tools. Because if you build all these tools and you use a crappy geofence to support them, now the notifications are coming at the wrong times. Analytical reports and detention reports are inaccurate. All the things that they support downstream start to lose validity because the very initial input was slightly off. So that's our
Mm-hmm.
goal is, hey, customers, you guys have built these incredible things. We're not here to change what you've done. We don't think we're better than you at what you're done. We just think this aspect, this very important aspect of what your platforms are built on, we think we can support and make it even better and therefore make your platform better. Because a lot of our customers sometimes they like to white label our service, like saying, hey,
Yeah.
instead of
Yep.
saying powered by Kestrel Insights, it's just, hey, we're just a great company and this is what we're doing, which we love. We get that and we want to support that. So that's just our goal. We're not looking to change or say we're better than anything, but we believe we can bring a lot of value to this core aspect of telematics and tracking and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think we could probably have another 30-minute conversation just on kind of how you approach the strategy with white labeling and with people using your
Yeah.
technology as an infrastructure service. But we're coming up on time. I try to keep these to 30 minutes or so. We really could go down that route. Maybe we should do that on another
We can do a
podcast of
follow
like
up. Yeah, we can do a
strategy
follow up.
of
Absolutely.
as we close out, is there anything that you would like to share that we haven't spoken about yet? Or maybe a question that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you, or anything of the sort. One last call.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think the biggest thing in a lot of our calls and demos and stuff is the obvious scare around this word integration. People think, okay, integration means dollar signs. It means
Mm,
developers. It means personnel, it means
yeah.
all this stuff. We hate using that word. We worked with a guy, his name is Michael Caney, phenomenal dude in the space, really helped us with kind of some of our sales stuff. And he's like, don't even use that word integration, because when I look at what you guys do, you're not this integration. We're only working with teams who are either have geofences in their system, they already have a roadmap to integrate geofences. They know what this is. They just need better ones, better feed. So we're just a data plugin is really what we see. So we've had
Mm-hmm.
teams where when we give them API documentation, or people need to tie into the API. We have some of our customers, you just send them spreadsheets monthly of just geofences. They send us addresses, we send them geofences. So from the earliest on, if you want to go bulk with us or if you want to go API, it is a very, very simple plugin. So we don't want to scare people off. But if you got questions around what that even looks like, find me on LinkedIn. You can find us at KestrelInsights.com. Don't be afraid to just ask us, hey, I've got this idea around geofences. Is that what you guys are, what you do? We can answer questions pretty quick. We're a pretty simple platform and you'll get it very quickly. So that's the last thing I would say, probably.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's really good. I found that interesting in our first conversation as well. And you're right, there's not really an integration. It's, hey, you could probably tomorrow send us an address and we would send you back a Polygon geofence and you would just use it instead of the radius geofence you have right now.
Exactly.
And so I think that's actually good advice. Yeah, it's interesting to think about designing a business in that way and sort of uses that same methodology. No, don't think about integration. Just think
Yeah.
about plugin. That's interesting. Awesome. Well, Lucas, I appreciate your time today. It's great to talk to you. I hope this is useful for you down the road as we get this out to people, but I hope also maybe this is useful to somebody thinking about developing an application or a software or a service in the freight tech space. I appreciate you sharing your experience around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Awesome. All right. See you, Lucas. Talk soon.